Chuck goes out to all y'all that's been missing us for mad years. One love, yo. Yeah, that's right. He's got game.
What's up, Buckers? That's what I'm going to call you guys from now on. Bucks fans. Just call them Buckers. This is Buck Life, the hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fan podcast made by hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fans for hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fans. And I always feel like I'm going to mess up when I begin with that. But so far, so good, I think. My name is Jacob Anderson, and I'm coming to you live from the Schilling Love Shack. My partner Chuck Schilling is with me as always. Chuck, how we doing?
We are doing well. Been a little bit, not much going on in Bucksland. You know, I always hate when we go 3-4 weeks without doing an episode, but nothing much has been happening. And on top of that, we were selling our house, so now that's done, and life is moving at a more relaxed pace for us. So, and things should be picking up soon. So life is good now.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, Chuck is living the dream with his wife and his cats. They sold the home and they're going on the road for a living. You want to real quick get into that for any interested listeners?
We bought a 38-foot RV. We are currently, where we're recording, we're at Jellystone Park in Caledonia. In a couple weeks we'll be up at State Fair. They just, hard to get a camping spot there during State Fair itself, but given my wife works at West Dallas Hospital, it's a very convenient place. But yeah, we're going to be around here for a bit. In the winter, we'll drive our new house on wheels down to Florida and get out of this hellhole of Wisconsin winters. No
for that, I'm quite jealous.
To those of you that are going to be stuck here. But yeah, little more slow pace. Not owning a house and consolidating, getting rid of a lot of possessions, and looking forward to it now. It's last 4 or 5 months have been stressful, getting the house ready to sell and then selling it and all that. So glad to be done.
Well, there you have it. Any of our listeners, if you need a place to stay in Florida for the winter, just give Chuck a shout. Maybe he'll let you stay in the Love Shack. Anyway, so let's get to the little bit of Bucks news that we do have. Might be a short version of the show. We just talked about how we sometimes say that and then it ends up an hour, but we'll see kind of where we go. Right away, we're going to lead off, and this is kind of a smaller thing to lead off with because at this point it's just chatter and kind of hearsay, but there was a report that Ray Allen, one Walter Ray Allen, Bucks legend, traded in one of the worst deals in NBA history in my mind, or at least in my biased mind, from the Bucks in 2002. But Ray Allen, who hasn't played in 2 seasons, who's 41 years old, is seriously contemplating an NBA comeback. I assume it would be for 1 season, but the big nugget from this story on Twitter was that Ray has talked to 2 of his former teams, the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks, about potentially coming back, which the minute I read this and it registered, I thought I was dreaming or something because God's honest truth, Ray Allen is my favorite Milwaukee Buck of all time, my favorite basketball player of all time, and maybe my favorite pro athlete of all time. It's a toss-up between him and Brett Favre, but holy shit. Ray Allen potentially coming home to Milwaukee. I mean, your initial thoughts, Chuck?
You know, as we're sitting here, about 5 minutes before we started recording, we said, should we get any last-minute guests on the show? We should have gotten the Grand Admiral Dan on here.
Well, yeah. I mean,
that's my initial thought.
To have one guy that would hate it.
Yeah, so, you know, my first thought was absolutely. I mean, he provides a service that would be a good fit for the team, shooting off the bench. You know, he's not going to play good defense, nothing about that.
Well, and he did improve on that after he left Milwaukee. I mean, at 41, again, who knows?
Athletically, I can't see him being able to guard. But that being said, I see him as a player-coach role. He can provide that veteran leadership. You know, we were kind of lacking that last year. You know, they traded away some of the veteran guys the previous year, and we were really lacking the veteran leadership and the shooting. So I think he provides a role on the court, a role off the court, and he would certainly be a fan favorite and get butts in the seat. So I think all around there is nothing to really dislike about it because he's not going to cost a lot of money. You know, if we were talking a big contract and anything more than 1 or 2 years, then yeah, let's put the brakes on this deal. But he's talking about coming back. It's got to be 1-2 years, veteran minimum, maybe a couple $1,000,000, whatever. It's nothing that's going to break the bank. And it makes sense from an on-court standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, whatever. Every every aspect about it, from a fan base, from a everything. I like everything about this potential.
Well, and again, I'm quite biased, but this needs to happen. I almost wish I hadn't read the snippet about him talking to the Bucks, because if he doesn't sign now, or if he goes to Boston or Miami or something along those lines, like, I'll forever be disappointed. I mean, it has to happen to me, because this is one of those wrongs that needs to be righted. Granted, it's we're looking at 14 years ago that this happened now, which is insane in my eyes, or seems like just yesterday. I can vividly remember the day he was traded, but he was obviously a guy that the fan base loved. I don't think many, Grand Admiral Dan excluded, wanted him to be traded in the first place. On the surface, that trade was horrible. It turned out to be even worse, considering that Gary Payton leaves immediately after the season is up. But it just, if he doesn't have some sort of homecoming with Milwaukee, it's one of those things that's always going to stick in my craw, and I'm always going to think that, man, that it shouldn't have gone down this way, because this is a guy who wanted to be here long term. I remember when he came back with the Celtics a few years, or maybe the second year that he was with Boston, some reporters were asking him about his time in Milwaukee, and Ray got a little choked up, took a minute to answer the question, and said, truth be told, he never wanted to leave, and he wanted to be to the Bucks what Brett Favre was to the Green Bay Packers, in the sense of bringing back a fan base, or bringing them back to prominence.
Before Brett Favre left for the Vikings.
If yes. At this point, Brett Favre was still our god in Wisconsin.
This was before some of the Brett Favre drama. If he comes back, if he goes to Boston, or I don't think Miami, I'll be okay if he goes to Boston or Milwaukee, because that's kind of where his two major fan bases. When he was in Miami, he was just chasing a championship ring. I don't want to see him there. If he goes anywhere other than Boston or Milwaukee, I will feel slighted.
What about Seattle?
Yeah, you're gonna go play on the Seattle. Oh.
Well, and speaking of Seattle, he also, I don't know how many Bucks fans know this, but when the Bucks were, I believe it was summer of 2005, they were trying to get Michael Redd signed to a max extension. I believe it was 6 years, $96 million is what he ended up agreeing to. But Ray actually waited to sign his extension with Seattle to see if there was a potential opening back in Milwaukee, because from what I've read, he was ready to just come back even after just freshly being traded there. So, I mean, that tells you just how much he really, really loved the city. And again, we talked about it's more of a player-coach type deal, or you would think it would be a player-coach type deal, and maybe this would open the door to him becoming an assistant in Milwaukee if he's interested in that.
Yeah, it absolutely, to me, whether it's officially recognized as a player-coach role, or if it's just he's that veteran guy that provides the locker room leadership, he'd be a coach mentor of some type. Whether the coaching staff wanted to officially recognize it or not is kind of irrelevant to the situation, because you always have veteran guys who are going to take the younger. Well, not every veteran will take the younger guys under their wing, but that's what you want out of those veteran guys.
You want a Steven Jackson type,
yeah.
Larry Sanders type.
Yeah. Take him to Script Club, goggle me slime, But yeah, so you would have to imagine a player like Ray Allen would almost certainly take some of these young guys under his wing and mentor them.
Well, the next question then, if he's actually serious about this and the Bucks were serious about bringing him in, I guess the next question would be, can he actually play? I mean, we just talked about 2 years ago was the last time that he was in the NBA. He never officially retired from the NBA, so I thought he was going to take maybe half a season off and then sign with a contender. That never really happened. But 2 years ago, at the age of 39, he was still an important role player on the Miami Heat and hit a huge shot to take them from the brink of elimination in Game 6 against the Spurs to force a Game 7. And if I remember that correctly, they even had the trophy out ready for the Spurs to do the whole presentation, and they had to bring it back because the Heat made this comeback, and their shitty fans left the building because they were down I don't remember. They were down big, yeah. It was huge and it was late.
Almost no one in the crowd. I remember watching that game. And
they made a miraculous comeback, and then fans were pissed because they're trying to get back into the building, which was a brilliant sight to see a bunch of Miami douchebags that left because they're fair weather fans trying to get back in. But again, at 39, he could still play. But again, And we're not talking about a starter. We're not talking about a guy that's logging 30, 35 minutes, something like that. You'd imagine this would be a 15, maybe 20-minute per game if he's really in great shape. But I don't know. Do you think he can still play?
I think he can still shoot. Beyond that, I don't know. I don't know how many minutes of running up and down the court he can give you. I don't think he can give you much defensively. He was never a stud defender. He got better as his career went on, but I don't think he's going to do much in terms of defense. But can he be offense off the bench? I see no reason why he couldn't shoot. You don't forget to shoot. You can throw Steve Kerr out there, and I'm sure he can still shoot. At his
It kind of reminds me of they just did a Brett Favre special with John Gruden's quarterback camp, and he was in the high school gym slinging balls to the high school receivers and to Antonio Freeman, who looked like shit. But it's one of those things. He talks about how he'll never not be able to throw the ball. And I feel like it's a similar thing with Ray.
Absolutely.
He has the prettiest jump shot in the history of the NBA. And he's arguably the greatest, or maybe second greatest, 3-point shooter of all time. I think maybe Steph Curry's already passed him.
Steph Curry's certainly on pace to pass him.
So you're right. The shooting thing, that's like riding a bike. I don't think he'll ever forget it. You just worry about his body, but
can he get separation? Are we
Sure.
going to need to run him off a screen constantly? And can the defense adjust? If it will certainly be limited depending on what he can and can't do at this point in his career.
Well, and he is a guy that even back 2 years ago when they were calling him over the hill, the reason why he could continue to play is because he has a work ethic that's unmatched in the NBA by just about anybody, and he keeps in great shape. Now we're talking 2 years. I don't know how much wear and tear goes on the body. You could argue that he's had a lot of rest. I'm not going to go with that angle. But in the article on Twitter, and I really wish I had the story in front of me, but he talked about how he was...
I'll pull it up while we're chatting.
He talked about how he was doing his regular routine that he used to do, when he was in the NBA, as far as getting shots up and getting his lungs going. And he said he was a little bit tired more tired than he would be back when he was in the NBA, but that he still got through it and that he was confident he could do it. It's can he play? Is his body in great shape? But I look at it from a Bucks standpoint, and yes, I can see him having a role on this team because the shooting is something that we sorely, sorely lack, but who's going to beat him out in the rotation? I mean, your candidates are Rashad Vaughn, who we're going to talk about later, who has not shown really much of anything in his NBA career, a rookie Malcolm Brogdon, who's a shooting guard that can't shoot, and then you're talking about Dellavedova possibly playing some shooting guard, but Middleton switching over to shooting guard. I think there's a potential role there, and again, we're already talking about Steve Novak, who hasn't signed with the Bucks, but it's kind of understood that he's going to sign. It seems to me like this is going to be a similar deal where, yes, you're going to be on the team, but it's going to be more of like a shooting coach type role. If you get that with Ray, not only are you going to have that mentor, but here's a guy that I think could potentially give you meaningful minutes as well.
Absolutely. That's like I said from the start, I don't see any downside to it. It's not going to come at a huge financial cost. It's not going to come at any sort of long-term, big money, anything. And he's not someone you have to worry about being a head case or ruining locker room chemistry, because I've never heard anything other than he's a great teammate to play with. So I feel like it's a no-risk move. There's, to me, absolutely minimal risk with this, depending on, as long as he's not asking for crazy money, which I can't see. There's just no scenario where I comprehend him asking for a dollar amount that it doesn't make sense to do it if you get it done. That's all I can say.
If he was coming back for money, he'd be talking to Philadelphia and Denver and teams that actually have cap space left. So I think we can throw that one out the window. And you talk about the mentor role. There's a guy that Ray played a lot of great years with, in Kevin Garnett, who has played the last 2 seasons in Minnesota, or a season and a half. I believe he was traded from Brooklyn in a kind of salary dump type deal. But he seems to really, really love that role, and I think it's like 50-50 whether or not he's going to come back and do it again this year, where he starts for them, he plays like 10-15 minutes a game, and then comes off the bench and essentially coaches all these guys. And you can't tell me that that's not doing wonders for a guy like Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, who, I mean, this was probably a hero to them. So again, if you want somebody that maybe could show Rashad Vaughn the right way or help him along with his shooting form or any young guy, it doesn't have to be a guard. It could be Thon. It could be Giannis. It could be Jabari.
Any of the guys, yeah.
Here's a guy that's going to teach you this is how you do it. This is how you succeed, how you be in the NBA for 20 years like I have, but with the work ethic. So
absolutely, and Ray Allen isn't one of those guys who skated around on physical talent. Not that he's not athletic and physically gifted, but a lot of what he's accomplished in his career is due to his work ethic. So that's absolutely something you could pass on to those other players.
And you talk about the ownership aspect of this, the marketing aspect, the fans. This is one of the easiest ways to generate goodwill amongst your fan base. It's an easy way to bring some of the fans back that maybe were huge Fairweather fans that loved that 2001 team and kind of, as it fell apart, just kind of went away from the NBA and the Bucks in general. Very, very easy to generate that interest, generate ticket sales. I could see myself being very emotional at the Bradley Center, Ray Allen getting introduced out of the tunnel again on opening night, because he was not just an important, he generated so many important memories to me as a sports fan, but even just overall my youth and things that I remember, and some of the best moments of my life were, at those playoff games in 2001. I think I've talked about it on this show before. I remember him hitting a huge three in Game 6, and standing up and throwing my arms in the air so fast and so hard that I punched my best friend in the face, out of sheer joy. And I just, I think this fan base deserves a homecoming, a reuniting of sorts with Ray, and I think he truly wants it. I mean, why else would the two teams that you're talking to are the teams you won your first championship with and the team that you started with?
Yeah, absolutely. If he wants it to happen, they need to make it happen. That's where I'll leave it.
And Giannis needs to give up his number if he wants it.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Well, I mean, come on. I mean, I love Giannis. He's probably in my top 5 favorite Bucks of all time. But come on, this is Ray we're talking about.
I know, but you're talking about.
They should have never gave him his number in the first fucking.
You're
place.
talking a player coming back for 1, maybe 2 seasons. I'd let them sort it out. If
one of those buy it.
Exactly. They always, if the player wants it, if Ray wants it, he can buy it. He's got money.
Well, I could see Giannis just giving it up. Too,
yeah, Giannis does seem the type that if Ray wanted it, he would give it up. But Ray also, to me, might be the type that would just say, hey, you're the future. You take it. I'll take. He can find some other number.
Well, yeah. When he went to Boston, Paul Pierce had number 34, so he used number 20, and he used that in Miami too. But I mean, hey, if he wants to do that again, then we got to ask Rashad Vaughn to give up that number, and I can't see. I mean, you don't ask a legend like Rashad Vaughn to give up his number for some 41-year-old turd like Ray Allen.
You might just cut Rashad Vaughn to make the roster spot for Ray Allen and make it easy. We'll just say, hey, Ray, you can have 20, and you don't even have to sort anything out. I don't know what route they'll go there. Well, we'll get to Rashad Vaughn.
Yeah,
soon.
I guess we will.
I think the rest. Ray Allen is the only positive.
Yeah, the rest of the show is just going to be us shitting on the Bucks. So.
We were talking beforehand, and Jake likes to go positive first. I like to finish on a positive note. I would have gone with the shitting on first. So
and maybe it's so ingrained in me as a Bucks fan to always kind of have a little bit of vitriol for the team. So.
Yeah, so there's not. That's really in the last month. That's the only positive thing that's come for the Bucks.
Right, the potential.
I mean, Summer League, it was a mixed bag, but we're going to talk a little about Summer League, but it was mostly a mixed bag, and you can't get too much out of Summer League, anyways. But I don't know. What do we have next?
The main big piece of news since the last podcast that we recorded was a player signing, Miles Plumlee, who don't get me wrong, played pretty well last year once he was given the opportunity, but he was a restricted free agent that the Bucks had the right to match any contract offer that he may have signed. Also, in the long run, if he didn't sign a contract, you'd have him for 1 year under their qualifying offer. But Miles Plumlee, kind of out of nowhere, this was a couple weeks after free agency had died down and nothing was happening, breaks that he signed a 4-year contract extension with the Bucks for $52 million. $52 million. So yeah, I mean, it happened. I don't know why it happened. This is just it. Again, like I said, it was so out of nowhere, and it made no sense to me. In my eyes, if I was an NBA general manager and I had a guy that was restricted almost 100% of the time, unless it's a guy that you're for sure giving a max extension to, something along those lines, let the market dictate what you're going to sign this player for if you want to keep them. And 4 years, $52 million is just so out of left field for a guy like Miles. He's a unique player, tremendous athlete at center. You're not going to find many guys that can get up and down the floor as quickly as he can at 6'11" and about 250. But this just seems like a bad move. I mean, I expected on the high end of what he would eventually sign to be 4 years, $32 million. So $8 million a year, somewhere in there, and we give him what is it? It ends up being $13 million a year. I'm shocked. I'm disappointed. I'm flabbergasted.
I'm all of that. I mean, I was speechless when I first saw the news break. I still haven't wrapped my head around why this was the deal. It just seems so unnecessary and a very much an overpay. I don't know what the thought process was. I don't know, somehow they determined that was the market value, but I can't fathom that was the actual market value. It just, I still haven't been able to wrap my head around it. It's been a couple weeks now. It seems like an overpay. He's certainly, I liked him starting more than I like Greg Monroe starting. From a fit standpoint, he could certainly run the floor better with Giannis and what we've got going on there. So that's fine. I'm fine keeping Plumlee around. I just don't think we needed to pay him that much money.
Well, you look at,
even with the increased salary cap, we didn't need to pay that much money.
Sure,
it's even $10 million at 4 years, $40 million looks a lot better than 4 years, $52. I don't know where the number would have came in, and I would have said, oh yeah, maybe we overpaid a little, but I get it. This one, I just don't get it. I don't think it was anywhere in the ballpark of what we needed to pay.
It just reeks to me of Dan Gadzarich, who signed was 6 years, $36 million back in the day, which I believe he was restricted free agent back then. So again, it doesn't sound, obviously with the money that's getting doled out now, it sounds like nothing. But back then, that was on the very, very high end for a backup center in the NBA, and it seems like we probably valued him more than the league did, which is a bad thing to happen. Is that you start doling out money that you just don't need to.
The good news is I personally think Plumlee's a better player than Gadzarich.
He's got a brain at least, or semblance of a brain.
So that's on the plus side for Plumlee. Athletically, Gadzarich was pretty athletic, so that's a wash. But he's not as dumb. He's got something going on inside the head. So
what? I can't remember who it was. I think it was somebody on Real GM. But back when Gadzarich was on the team, it was one of the funniest things I'd read about him. Is somebody posted that Dan Gadzarich reminds them of like a rambunctious squirrel, just like he just randomly run as fast as he can, stop, like pop his head around, look around a little bit, then take off running again. He had some funny facial expressions. It was like spot on.
Yes, I don't remember who made that comparison. Someone on Real GM, I believe. But
kudos to whoever did.
I remember reading that and thinking, yep, that's exactly what Dan Gadzarich is.
Now you talk about besides the money. We could continue talking about the money and the roster composition, because now you have Greg Monroe, who's making, I believe, a shade under $18 million a year. Miles Plumlee at $13 million a year, and John Henson, I think, at $11 million a year. So, I mean, this is roughly more than a third of your cap space on one position of center, and to be honest, none of the three are particularly that great for you. I mean, Monroe's obviously the most talented of those guys, but we saw that he's not a good fit. When Plumlee signed this deal, I assumed that something was happening with Monroe, so I was kind of excited for a second to see maybe here's the trade, and we've had nothing but crickets.
That was the one thing when I saw this. Oh, Monroe's got to be going out and then I was excited to see what are we getting back from Monroe. That was the silver lining with this contract. I said, okay, something's happening.
Crickets.
Nothing's happened.
Then you take a guy like John Henson, who, you can call him Tin Man because he has no heart. He looks great maybe 2-3 times a year when somebody pisses him off or rips his jersey or says something about his mom or says something about Chipotle. But it's a guy who has regressed in many, many aspects of his game since he came into the NBA, particularly his rebounding. But the other thing is a guy who is rail thin and looks to have just put on baby fat since he's came to the league. So I think that was a bad deal the moment that he signed that as well, regardless of the cap space going up. And then you have Plumlee now. If you combined all three of these guys, maybe you have a good center there. But again, as is, we have three guys that we don't necessarily know are long-term starters for this team. And you hate to think that a guy like Plumlee is going to be a backup at $13 million a year, and a guy like Henson's going to be a backup at $11 million a year. Screw you, Larry Sanders, for putting us in this position, because our center position should be locked up with our core guys, but, he wanted to go paint and smoke pot, so, hey, whatever, he's got his money.
Absolutely. It's, if we could get angry John Henson and energy Miles Plumlee and do something with Monroe, I'm okay. I'm okay if we had those two at a total of $24 million a year and we could get them playing to their potential day in and day out. I feel like you can do worse than that. The problem is, like you said, John Henson, 2 or 3 games here, he looks like he's a beast, and he's going to go out there and get 25 rebounds, drop 25 points, block 18 shots. I mean, when he's on, he's one of the best that you see out there, but that's twice a year when someone gets in his face or holds his jersey. The Knicks were holding his jersey and getting away with it, and then he's pissed off. And then the infamous Matt Barnes game last year. Those were the 2 games that he looked like an absolute stud out there. If we could get that John Henson every game, and then you get the change of pace with Miles Plumlee running the floor, I'm okay with it. But I have no confidence that we're going to get that. I think Miles Plumlee will be decently consistent, because he was fairly consistent last year once he started moved into the starting role and Monroe was coming off the bench. But it's still an overpay for him. And Henson, I thought the same thing when we signed him to that extension. That was an overpay. So we're overpaying 2 guys. And then Monroe's probably paid what he deserves, but he's not a good fit. So our center position is an absolute, it's a clusterfuck. There's no other way around it. That's the only way to describe it. And the only way we need to move Monroe. I don't know for what, but I don't know what the game plan is here. I'm frustrated by the situation because we're paying a lot of money to 3 guys who, like you said, if we could combine them into one player, even take aspects of each of them and combine them into 2 players. Give Greg Monroe's heart to John Henson, and I don't know, give Miles Plumlee's motor to Greg Monroe, and we'll call it a day or something. Whatever combination you want to mix it up, but the 3 pieces are not what we need, in my opinion.
Well, and talking about the money, for comparison, for people that want to say that maybe the Bucks didn't overpay and this is really what the market was, sure. I mean, you could say that. I remember when the Bucks got into free agency in 2010 after the Fear the Deer run, they kind of set the shit market by, at midnight, I believe, offering Drew Gooden a 5-year, $30 million deal that I don't think anybody saw 5 years for Drew Gooden at that time.
He had been on, 8 teams in 10 years or something at that point? He had not
almost
stayed,
every team.
Yeah, he had, or maybe 10 teams in 10 years. I don't remember. He'd been on a team, he was traded every single year. And, I'm still mad about that contract.
For this free agency period, maybe it was the Lakers that kind of screwed everybody because first day of free agency, they signed Timofey Mozgov from the Cavaliers, who was racking up, did not play coach's decisions in the playoffs, to a 4-year, $64 million contract, which I think if you're asking me straight up, when you take money out of the equation, who I'd rather have as a center, I'm going with Miles Plumlee. So maybe they kind of screwed the market, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to overpay your own guy. Here's some comparisons for backup centers who I think are in Miles Plumlee's. I mean, you can't compare them skills-wise, but as far as overall impact level and what they should be paid, Dwayne Dedmon signed for 2 years, $6 million. Al Jefferson, 3 years, $30 million. Daryl Arthur, 3 years, $23 million. Cole Aldrich, which I think would have been a good deal, 3 years, $22 million. Festus Ezeli, who a lot of people were talking about as the next big thing for Golden State, as taking over for Bogut, 2 years, $16 million from Portland. Dwight Powell, 4 years, $37. Jason Smith, 3 years, $16 million. Myers Leonard, 4 years, $41 million. Those are, or Tyler Zeller, re-signing with Boston, 2 years, $16 million. Those are all the kind of deals that somewhere in that range I was expecting Miles Plumlee to be. Maybe not the low end like the Dedmon deal, which I think was a tremendous deal for San Antonio, but somewhere between $6 to $8 million is what I was expecting, and I think is what was fair. You essentially double that, or close to double it, depending on what side of the spectrum you're on. I don't get it. Again, there's not much more to say other than that. Just why? Why?
I mean, other than the Lakers deal, he comes out with the second highest deal
for the ones that listen. Yeah,
of your list. Obviously, there are higher played.
Yeah, there was some other bad ones too.
But yeah, it's definitely looking at that list of players. It's hard to argue that it's at least somewhat of an overpay. I think everyone should be able to agree that it's an overpay. And then it's just a matter of how much, and there's probably disagreements. Did we overpay by $3 million a year? Did we overpay by $5 million a year? I'd say somewhere in that range. I think he's probably in the current, with the new salary cap and the current market, he's probably worth somewhere between $8 to $10 million a year. That's the going rate for most of these guys. Not all of them. Some of those deals were a steal, like you said. But so yeah, we certainly, in my opinion, and I don't think anything would sway that, overpaid. Now, if he comes out and he's a stud the next couple of years, and maybe we got a steal. But I don't see any way we did. And even if he turns into a stud, I feel like you sign him to what his value is right now.
Right, and the thing one of the things that's frustrating is the Bucks held all the cards. He was a restricted free agent. Again, you either wait for him to sign a deal, or you use what the money that's being thrown around against him and say, this is what this guy got, this is what this guy got. You have analytics guys that can make comparisons if you need to, just to show them, like, yes, this is your value. Something along those lines, but, like I said, weeks after the free agency hoopla had died down, to just one morning it's breaking on Twitter, 4 years, $52 million. Outrageous. But again, let's not act like there's no anything that could happen good from this. Like, maybe we're idiots, and the Bucks see something in him that they saw in Chris Middleton, and a lot of people thought that they gave Chris Middleton way too much money when they signed him to that extension, and now it's looking like one of the best bargains in the NBA.
I liked that contract from the start, but yeah, I don't like this one, but this isn't as bad as the Drew Gooden contract.
No, nor Dan Gedzuric.
Yeah, exactly. So at least Miles Plumlee plays, and he's a decent fit for the Bucks. He's not the perfect fit, but he's a decent fit for what the Bucks do. So, it could be worse. It's not. I wasn't heartbroken over it. I'm more confused than anything. It's more confusion than it is anger. When Drew Gooden was signed, when we traded for Corey Maggette, Monta Ellis, these are all moves that I felt sick to my stomach
moves
over.
I have nightmares about.
This one, it's just confusion, and maybe I'll be proven wrong. I'd love nothing more than for Miles Plumlee to go out there and be an all-star next year and prove me wrong.
Basketball-wise, he looked great in the limited time that he got. He didn't really play until the second half of the season, so maybe there's still room for him to grow. Him and Giannis had unbelievable synergy on the pick and rolls, and him, cutting to the
and maybe
basket,
that's what
getting
this is.
the
Maybe they want to keep Giannis. It's all about Giannis, because he is. Giannis, and then to a lesser extent Jabari, we will go as far as those two take us, specifically Giannis. And if they thought this was the best thing for Giannis's development, it'd be hard to argue with.
Sorry, a really cool guy on a motorcycle just drove by. Yeah, awesome dude.
Not sure how, this microphone we use is a pretty good sensitive microphone, so not sure if the motorcycle sound in the background will show up when you're when you live out of a campground. You get plenty of people who tow a motorcycle behind their RV, and that's how they get around once they're at their destination.
Speaking of sensitivity, great segue. Let's talk about Thon Maker and the Summer League team. So the Bucks didn't fare well.
I worry when we transition on sensitivity. I worry where Jake is going to go.
I'm trying to watch myself lately. watch myself doing what. Yeah.
The kids are getting older. They're going to start understanding these dirty jokes soon. So, yeah, it's probably wise to start watching yourself.
I'm going to be Bob Saget more on Full House than his stand-up act. So.
Okay, there we go.
But, so the Summer League happened. Thon Maker, he had some good moments, had some bad moments as one of the youngest or oldest players on the court, depending on who you believe. But the Bucks didn't fare well overall. The talent level that they had was pretty shit, even by Summer League standards. Let's kick it off with Thon. The first couple games, he looked amazing, to be honest. I mean, he was hitting jump shots. He was rebounding the basketball. He was blocking. I mean, it looked like Larry Sanders blocking shots just with his timing and using his length and his physical gifts to block a shot at its highest point before it becomes a goaltend. Just little things that you don't expect to see out of a rookie. Then I think it was the third game, he gets called for 10 fouls out in a Summer League game, which you get 10 in the Summer League game. And from that point on in the Summer League, he kind of just didn't have any aggression. I think he was playing scared. He didn't want to continue to embarrass himself with the fouling and that. And just looked like a completely different player. Obviously, first time playing against anything close to an NBA talent, so you're going to get some good and bad there. But overall, I think with Thon, age aside, because I know that's a touchy subject for some people, so I'm not going to get into it, but I really, really liked what I saw from him, and I think it's something that you can build on, and he didn't look like a Joe Alexander out there, so you have a piece of clay that you can mold.
Yeah, Summer League is typically dominated by guards, so it's always going to be hard to get a read on these big guys to begin with. But that being said, he showed flashes, and that's all I'm ever looking for in Summer League is don't look completely lost. Don't go out there and look like Rashad Vaughn or Joe Alexander, the bucket of ass. So he didn't. He showed some moments. Like you said, that first game, he looked really good. That was, unfortunately, the only game I got to watch. This whole moving and selling the house thing was a lot of work, and I'm not the type. I know some people will record a live sporting event and watch it after the fact. If I'm not watching it live, I'm not going to watch it. That's just me. I can't.
So it's YouTube highlights for that.
Yeah, exactly. I did watch some of the highlights from the later game, so I did see some of the highlights. But absolutely, all I'm ever looking for in Summer League out of a rookie is show me something. Show me you have basketball skills. Show me you can play against other players who are either NBA talent or at minimum fringe NBA talent. Not every player in the Summer League is going to be on an NBA team this year. Plenty will be in the D League or go over to Europe or China or wherever they end up. But they're at least on the cusp of NBA talent at this point. You're not playing against all the college kids who 90% of them won't even be in the D League because there's so many college kids out there. So that's what I want to see. Look like you belong in that game. And I think we saw flashes of that from Thon, for sure.
Well, the biggest positive to me was the defensive potential. I've gone from where I think his upside is. I've tempered my expectations on him. But if he can be a Larry Sanders type that's going to use the length to get the shot blocking, the rebounding, and give you a little bit more offense than Larry could, who was basically a garbage man on offense, that's tremendous, and that's exactly what you need at the center position. I'm skeptical about his ability to add weight and muscle, just because I don't believe he's 19 years old, so I think he's further along in his physical development. But I liked what I saw, and I think at worst, given his physical gifts and his desire and intangibles, the work ethic, I think at worst you're going to have a good backup center, maybe stretch four, that can block some shots for you. So I don't see him being a bust. Again, that's a lot to say based off of a summer league, but I really like the pick. I'm not giddy about it as I was on draft night, but I do like what we've seen from Thon.
Well, and honestly, where we were picking, unfortunately, we weren't picking in the top five. We would have loved if you're not going to make the playoffs and you're not going to make a run at a championship. We'd all want to pick in the top end of the lottery for sure, top five, top three, wherever that is. So when you're picking down in that, after pick, most years after pick about 7 or 8, it's a total crapshoot. So where we were picking at this year, if we get even 4 or 5 years of serviceable, whether it's backup, whether he turns into a legit starter, that's good for where we're picking at. Because if you look at what you normally get in that range in the draft, it's usually not much. Yes, you will have guys who come out in that range or even later every year who are all-stars down the road or Hall of Famers, but they are few and far between. So I've always had the expectation that as long as he contributes something over the next 4 to 5 years, whether that's as a solid backup or if he does develop into a starter, I'm fine with it. So, my expectations haven't changed much, though the ceiling definitely seems to be lower than what we had initially hoped.
The other Bucks draft pick that participated in the Summer League was Malcolm Brogdon, who, expectedly to me, showed his age out there, meaning he was a senior graduate from the University of Virginia, and it showed. He looked like a veteran compared to a lot of the younger guys in the league. His playmaking was great. His shooting was kind of up and down, more so down, but he at least to me showed with the playmaking and also with his defensive potential just on the ball as a defender to have a role in the NBA. Some were comparing him to like an Eric Snow, who is the size of like a 2 guard, but it really would be kind of more of a slower paced point guard. So Brogdon, again, to be expected. I think in Summer League you said it was guard dominated, and he looked well despite the shooting not being so great and maybe not being a great athlete. But to me, a guy that certainly is worth taking a flyer on and keeping around, and seeing if maybe you can, especially if he develops a jump shot, maybe turning it into something being a net positive for you off the bench.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a second rounder, so you really don't need to get anything out of him. To me, there's no second round pick that's ever a waste or a bust or whatever. They're second round picks. They're more often than not. I don't know what the percentage is, but probably 60 or 75% of second-round picks don't even ever step foot on an NBA floor. That'd be an interesting subject to look up. I don't know if anyone's done the research, but a lot of them don't ever even play in the NBA. So he looks like he can contribute something defensively, distributing the ball, maybe develop a shot, but it doesn't look like he's going to kill you in the games, and he'll probably serve a role coming off the bench. I don't know that we'll ever see him starting, but for a second-round pick, that's about all I expect.
We saved the best for last. Rashad Vaughn was the other recent Bucks draftee to participate in the Summer League. Everything was kind of set up for him to do really well. He was going to be the lead guy on the team. Last year he did not look great. He looked okay, but you could maybe attribute that to being the youngest player in the Summer League and, just not having much experience. So, but everything now, a year in the league, a very down year. Some might say historically bad, but he's had some experience playing against NBA level talent. He was going to be your lead guard. You want him to be a dynamic scorer, shooter, and aside from a few hot streaks during a couple games, he looked like absolute trash, which does not bode well for his NBA career. Again, the Summer League doesn't mean much of anything, but one thing you can say is typically if you are a monster in the Summer League, that doesn't mean shit. It doesn't mean you're going to be a successful player in the NBA. But if you look like dog shit in the Summer League, and I'm talking about complete dog shit, Joe Alexander style, it's usually a very, very good indicator that you're just not going to make it in the league. Rashad had everything lined up to have a great Summer League, and again, looked like a complete bust. I'm not writing him off completely, but it's going to take an awful lot to change my mind as far as looking at him as a future piece for the Bucks.
Absolutely. Like you said, you can look like a monster in the Summer League. I won't read much into it. I don't read much into Summer League in general, but if you look completely lost out there, especially in your second season and especially as a guard, because it is typically a guard-dominated game, that's just not good at all. And that's really about all I can say about Rashad Vaughn. I'm not optimistic about him ever developing into anything at this point. He just we might be moving on from him sooner than later, the way his career is playing out.
Well, it's funny you brought up how draft positioning, how it can make such a world of difference, even from 7th, 8th pick to 10th pick. The Bucks missed out on a lot of good players by just a few picks in that last year's draft. I think they picked Vaughn 18th. Cameron Payne with. I mean, it was a deep draft, and there wasn't a whole lot of big misses after him, but just before him were a lot of good players that were taken. So I guess they're kind of screwed in that aspect. But there's also reports that the Bucks, their scouting department and John Hammond were on board with Bobby Portis, who had an up and down year, but I would say a much more successful rookie year than Rashad Vaughn. They were ready to take him, and they got overridden because Jason Kidd wanted Vaughn. So if the reports are true that Kidd has kind of been ousted as far as having any real power in the front office, that looks like a good move so far.
Yeah, it's... I would have preferred Bobby Portis to Rashad Vaughn myself, and I think he showed more, but so far there's nothing there that shows Bobby Portis is going to be anything special in the NBA either. But
Sam Decker went one pick after, and that's Bucks have a huge hole at 3-4 kind of swingman right now.
Yeah, exactly. So there were, in most aspects, last year picking 17th, this year picking 10.
Why couldn't we flip it?
More than who we were picking, I'm more frustrated that we were picking in the position we were. Chasing and barely getting in the playoffs last year, and then this year kind of failing to tank when we should have tanked to get 7 or 8. We should have been picking a couple spots higher both seasons. So that's certainly frustrating more than who we picked at the position, because I don't expect anything out of pick 17 or pick 10. If we really want to get a difference maker, it's got to be top 5.
Well, and you know what, Rashad, prove us wrong, Vaughn.
I would love nothing more than Vaughn, Plumlee, John Henson, all these guys that we're talking down to right now. Prove us wrong this year.
Well, I think just what we're talking about now just kind of goes to show that this doesn't seem like a completed team, even for just this upcoming season, let alone the future moving forward. So I guess I will be surprised if we don't see a Greg Monroe trade or a Michael Carter-Williams trade or something to change the roster composition, because right now it looks like a mess, and I've been accused of being way too negative in the past before, but I'm sorry if I don't have something positive to get me excited. I'm not going to pretend like it. The only thing I can say is, regardless of what the roster looks like, if Giannis and Jabari don't take the next step, none of these small moves, none of these irrelevant guys matter in the long run. That's the future of our team, barring anything major happening.
Absolutely. Barring a major injury, it's Giannis development, Jabari development, Middleton keep doing what Middleton does. I will say this, going into this season, the free agents we signed this year are better fits than what we did last year. We didn't trade a first and a second round pick for Grievous Vasquez again. We didn't do anything quite as dumb as what we did last year. So like you said, if last year was Jason Kidd and this year we're back to John Hammond, or I know there's the GM in waiting, if we're back to actual GMs making moves instead of Jason Kidd, silver lining, maybe we're in better hands going forward, because last offseason was a total disaster. This offseason, mixed bag for me. We're hopefully not done with the offseason. I'd still like to see Greg Monroe get traded before the season starts. Michael Carter-Williams, I can't imagine he has any value, but if someone wants him, if they want to send us some basketballs back or something, whatever, a mop boy to mop up the floor when the players fall, we need to mop up the sweat.
That concentrated Gatorade powder, that's better than actual Gatorade, because you can change the sweetness or make it, whatever.
Whatever, Michael Carter-Williams, I'd personally trade him for just about anything. Greg Monroe has value, so I'm not just going to give him away, because worst case, we bring him off the bench. But last offseason, I would say, was a total disaster. This offseason, a mixed bag, but I certainly agree with your assessment that this is not a completed team. I don't think we're in a position to win a championship this year, but that's likely due to Giannis and Jabari's development. They need to develop more some as well. So, we're still 2 or 3 years away from a championship no matter what. So, I guess in the big picture, we didn't give crazy money to anyone or super long-term money. So, nothing is backbreaking. I shouldn't be as down as I am right now. But, the moves are disappointing. And I guess the big disappointment to me right now is that we haven't moved Monroe for something. I kind of want to be excited that we got something back, whether it's a future draft pick or a young player with potential. I want that excitement more than anything right now, more than any of these contracts we handed out. That's what I want.
Well, I'll leave you guys with this. Chuck just said that no matter what, it's going to be at least a few years before we're contending for a championship. Well, maybe it doesn't have to be. Maybe there is a trade that we could pull off that could make us contenders right away. But I'm not going to get into that now. We'll talk about that on the next podcast, which hopefully is after Greg Monroe is traded. We don't know exactly when, but if something big happens, you'll see us in your feed real soon after that.
I'm done moving now, so I'm a little more flexible on my schedule. Absolutely, if something big happens, we'll be back. That said, we'll try to get back a little sooner, anyways. But as always, find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes. We're pretty much everywhere. Follow us, share the links. That's how you get out there. We're not paying for followers or anything, so the only way we get out there is word of mouth.
Do us a solid.
Yeah, if you enjoy us, and if you want to come on sometime, you know how to reach us. Email us, contact us if you know us in person. We'll get you on there. We do have one listener who I've never met, but he wants to be on the show. I told him about a year ago we'd get not a year ago, but 6 months ago, and we'll get you on still at some point in time. But yeah, we're always open to new guests, especially if you're in the Milwaukee area. But yeah, so share those links, follow us, share away, and we'll see you again soon.
Later, Buckers.